Yeah, we're going to start out with the first item on the agenda, the basic information. Go ahead to the next slide there. All right, so design reviews are performed by the structural engineers of the Design Standards Unit of the Quality Assurance Division, and sometimes when necessary, also structural engineers of the Engineering Architecture Design Division. Reviews are performed to verify that buildings and other structures are compliant with the current governing building code, reference standards, and the Tenant Construction Review Manual. Next slide. The current codes enforced by the Port Authority are the 2021 International Building Code New Jersey Edition, the 2020 Building Code of New York State, which is based on IBC 2018, the 2022 New York City Building Code, which is based on IBC 2015, and the 2025 Tenant Construction Review Manual. Codes are specific to the locations of the PA facilities. You can go to the next slide. So, of course, in New Jersey, we use the New Jersey edition of the IBC. In New York State, we use the New York State edition, but that does not include New York City. New York City has its own building code, and we're currently on the 2022 edition of the New York City Building Code. Next slide. So each of these codes also references standards. For example, the New Jersey Code references ACI 318-19 for concrete design, ASCE 7-16 for design loads and other design criteria, and then AISC 360-16 for the steel design. If you're a structural engineer, you'll know the specification. The 2016 steel specification is in the 15th edition of the AISE Steel Construction Manual. That's the light blue book with the silver lettering. Next slide. So New York State has similar standards referenced, but the ACI 318 version is a different year. The New York State is on the 2014 version of ACI. Next slide. And then New York City references many of the same standards as the New York State Code, but do pay attention to Chapter 35 of the respective building codes for a complete list of the reference standards. Also keep in mind that some of the reference standards are modified by the code, so pay attention to the code for any modifications in the referenced standards. Next slide. All PA facilities must follow the 2025 Tenant Construction Review Manual. That's New Jersey, New York State, and New York City. Next slide. So the tenant alteration applications are submitted for new construction, and that includes building extensions, building demolitions, structural modifications for change of use, additions to existing base buildings to accommodate tenant requirements, and other non-building structures like marine facilities or solar installations. Documents will include drawings, structural calculations, relevant reports, and technical specifications. Next slide. We review new building construction. Next. Extensions to existing buildings. Next. Extensions to framing. Next. And structural details for tenant fit-outs. That would include any modification to the existing structure. And the majority of TAAs would fit under that category. So for the submittal package, What's included in the submission? You can go to the next slide. Provide documents necessary to demonstrate that the design submitted for review is code compliant and satisfies PA project requirements. So we're not limiting you to anything in particular, but typically that's going to include calculations, drawings, reports, and technical specifications. It's important to indicate the applicable building code for the jurisdiction on the submitted documents. We already went over the current codes, and also the appropriate reference standards, which would include ASCE 7, ACI 318, and AISC 360. Verify and indicate on the submittal documents compliance with the 2025 TCRM. Next. So all the design documents need to be signed and sealed by a licensed PE. Include applicable technical specifications, show design criteria, such as wind and seismic parameters, list the required special inspections, verify that the structural drawings are fully dimensioned, all members are called out, include column schedules with loads. Next. So verify with calculations that existing structure and foundation can safely support additional loads from new construction. For renovations and additions, note all the assumptions made. Verify adequate support for mechanical equipment. Provide calculations for mechanical equipment that exceeds 1,000 pounds. Verify that the partition walls are adequate to resist horizontal loads. Provide seismic bracing for sprinkler piping systems in accordance with the NFPA 13 and ASCE 7-16. Next. So the review process, what happens after the documents are received by QAD? QAD's primary function is to review for code compliance. The review also checks compliance with design standards and regulations referenced in the building code. As I mentioned before, that would be standards such as ASCE 7 for minimum design criteria, ACI 318 for the concrete design, and AISC for steel design. But there are others, and those would be listed in Chapter 35 of the respective building code. Submissions are also reviewed for compliance with the general requirements of the TCRM. The goal of the review is to audit the design documents for compliance with the code requirements and issue a recommendation for approval to construct without comment as soon as possible. But except for simple alteration projects, it is not common for the initial submittal to be a fully compliant set. There's usually at least one or two comments. Next. The review is an audit, not a design check or value engineering exercise. The review will generally follow a simple but not rigid checklist. Depending on the size of the project, not all items on the list will be applicable. And as I mentioned before, there are 4 categories of documents that we review: calculations, drawings, reports, and specifications. Next. So calculations are critical for the review of the structural design, and the calculation packages will vary depending on the size of the TAA and what's included in the design. Next. The calculations are reviewed for compliance with the codes and standards and also TCRM guidelines. TCRM section 7.3 lists the requirements of what needs to be included in the calculations. Next. The drawings will illustrate structural scheme for resistance to gravity and lateral loads. And we review for the gravity and lateral systems. Next. We also review details and sections that are provided in the structural drawings. Next. The building code does require structural drawings to be fully dimensioned and all members called out. Next. And the structural review is not limited to the structural drawings themselves. There are structural elements on the mechanical plans. We verify that the equipment is properly supported. Next. And also sprinkler systems are reviewed for the inclusion of seismic bracing. Next. We do review reports such as basis of design reports, peer review reports, geotechnical reports, and wind tunnel reports when applicable. Next. And as I mentioned before, technical specifications that are relevant should be included. They are also reviewed for code compliance and compliance with the reference standards. Next. So some of the common comments that come up during the review process. Most commonly, the comment is probably related to missing or incomplete information. So it's important to provide a narrative of the structural systems and sufficient calculations to demonstrate the stability of the structure with both the gravity and lateral loads. We're looking for detailed calculations, but we're not looking for just computer printouts where we have thousands of pages of computer information that we need to go through. We're looking for something clear and concise. So if you have computer printouts, we recommend that you organize them in an appendix. It can be helpful to have a key plan and make it easy for the reviewer to find relevant information for the structural system. The building code identifies the categories of buildings for which an independent structural peer review is required. Also, a key element analysis may be required as spelled out in the building code for single element supports that are more than 15% of the building area. Next. Some of the things we check for in structural calculations would be a list of applicable codes and standards, design criteria, design loads and load combinations, a descriptive summary of analysis and design for gravity and lateral systems, deflections and drifts, and sufficient calculations to demonstrate the stability of the structure under applied gravity and lateral loads. Next. As I mentioned before, it is helpful to provide a key plan in the calculations just to make it easy for the reviewer to find relevant information. Next. So the drawings need to illustrate the structural scheme for resistance to gravity and lateral loads. Drawings need to be fully dimensioned, complete structural scheme, all structural members identified in the structural system supporting the gravity and lateral loads. Include design loads, geotechnical information, required special inspections, and if there's foundation work, include the foundation details, show the frost depth for the shallow foundations, and for deep foundations, we need the pile types, capacities, and lengths. Next. So in the general notes on the drawings, show the code mandated structural design information, loads, wind and seismic design data, and geotechnical information. Include a list of required special inspections, New York City does require that demolitions have special inspections, but relevant to most projects would be the steel inspections for welds, for high strength bolts. One that's often missed is the required special inspection for cold form steel construction. Concrete has requirements of special inspections, and also post-installed anchors require special inspections. Next. As I mentioned before, it's important to fully dimension framing plans, make sure all members are identified. Next. For foundation work with shallow foundations, submit a copy of the geotechnical report. Next. Also specify frost depth and verify footings are protected from frost in accordance with the building codes. Next. If there are deep foundations, we need the specified pile types, the allowable pile loads, and when required, identify piles to be tested to verify pile capacity. Next. Oh, I should also mention regarding the foundations, it's good to coordinate the foundation with the column schedule and show the loads from the column schedule into the foundations. So for alterations to existing structures, for mechanical equipment, indicate on the drawings the support of mechanical equipment and provide structural calculations for additional load on existing structure. Alterations to existing slabs. Slab cuts, core drilling, and trenching must be indicated on the structural drawings. Provide calculations for any required reinforcement of existing structure. I should also mention, do not delegate code compliance to contractors. If coring or slab cutting needs to be done, it needs to be shown on design drawings. Next. So non-structural components are also reviewed for compliance with the code. That would be ceiling systems, partitions, and sprinkler systems. The sprinkler systems are part of the life safety infrastructure, so they're a vital part of the building, and they need to be braced for seismic loads. Next. So delving into that a little bit more, for the ceilings, the 2022 New York City Building Code does have some very specific requirements for hanging ceilings. That's in section 808 of the code and also appendix R, so pay special attention to that. The TCRM does not allow powder actuated fasteners for ceilings or ceiling hangers. Next. Partitions need to be supported and laterally braced according to the code. Check bracing requirements for partitions exceeding 6 feet in height. That needs to comply with the IBC code and also ASC 7-16, section 13.5.8.1. Next. Partitions need to satisfy the minimum lateral load requirement of 5 pounds per square foot. Next. And as I mentioned before, sprinkler systems also need to have seismic bracing. Next. And that's according to ASC 7-16, section 13.6.7.2 and NFPA 13. Okay. Next slide. So some keys to success. The reviewer is not an adversary and is available to discuss and assist in the resolution of comments. understand the intent of the review is for code compliance, and it's helpful to anticipate the reviewer's needs and make it easy to locate needed information. The requirements of the building code, reference standards, and the TCRM will dictate the methodology of the review. Present information with the intent to verify that the code requirements have been satisfied. Next.